The harsh, cold click of metal echoed jarringly amidst the bustle of the baggage claim hall at the International Terminal of Gateway City Airport, GCIA. It came immediately after a tight squeeze and a sharp pang of pain as her wrists were wrenched behind her back. Aaliyah Dubois gasped, struggling to keep her balance as she was forced against the edge of the rumbling baggage carousel. Shiny steel handcuffs snapped shut around her wrists, cold and brutal. She was dressed in a stylish yet comfortable outfit. A cashmere knit top that was clearly high-end, her feet clad in soft Tod's loafers. Her orange Hermes Birkin bag sat on a nearby luggage cart, a stark, ironic contrast to its owner's current predicament. "What the hell are you doing? Get your hands off me!" Aaliyah tried to keep her voice calm, but couldn't hide her indignation. "You have no right to do this!" Officer Brian Kelly, the younger of the two cops, was the one who had just applied the cuffs. He looked slightly tense, avoiding the eyes of the passengers who were beginning to stop, staring with curiosity and shock. A few cell phones were already raised. Standing right beside him, Officer Chad Miller, the instigator, wore a smug half-smile. It was he, with his condescending attitude and inappropriate remarks, who had escalated the situation simply because Aaliyah had refused his unreasonable demand to see her papers and, perhaps, his indecent undertones. "No right?" Miller sneered, his voice dripping with condescension. "Resisting an officer right here in an international airport? That's more than enough right to cuff you, ma'am." "I wasn't resisting. You're the ones harassing me and abusing your power," Aaliyah retorted, her voice beginning to tremble slightly with choked indignation. "You stopped me without cause, insulted me, and now you're handcuffing me. Suspicion of smuggling luxury goods and failure to comply with an officer," Miller shouted the hastily fabricated reason, trying to drown out the growing murmurs from the crowd. "Kelly, get her to the security room. Move it." He signaled Kelly to push Aaliyah away, leaving behind the cart with the Birkin bag and the astonished, indignant stares of the onlookers. Aaliyah didn't resist physically. She knew it would be futile and could make things worse. But the look she gave the two officers through her sunglasses was sharp as a knife, holding a steely resolve and a silent warning. These two young power abusers had no idea they had just made a fatal mistake, one that would cost them dearly. Just about 15 minutes earlier, the atmosphere at baggage carousel number 3 had been quite normal. Aaliyah Dubois, having just finished a short business trip combined with a brief vacation in Paris, was patiently waiting for her last suitcase. She felt a bit tired after the long flight, but was eager to get home to her husband, Mayor Charles Dubois, after nearly a week apart. The outfit she had chosen ensured comfort for travel while maintaining the necessary elegance and sophistication of a first lady, although she always tried to keep a simple, understated style when not attending official events. Officers Chad Miller and Brian Kelly were patrolling near the area at that time. Their Thursday afternoon shift had been boring, with no significant incidents. Miller, a smug individual who always felt superior and harbored latent discriminatory attitudes towards people of color and those he deemed inferior, was itching for some action. He wanted something to assert his authority or simply to amuse himself. His eyes scanned the crowd of waiting passengers and landed on Aaliyah Dubois. Her dark skin, designer clothes, expensive handbag, and confident demeanor immediately caught his attention, but in a negative way. "Look at that black woman over there, Kelly," Miller nudged his younger partner, his voice low but dripping with contempt. "Dressed so fancy, probably smuggling designer goods to resell, or maybe some rich guy's kept mistress." Ugly stereotypes about successful black women immediately surfaced in his mind. Kelly, always eager to please Miller and appear street-smart, chuckled along. "She does look pretty high and mighty, boss. Bet her suitcases are full of undeclared stuff. Should we go check her out?" "Yeah, let's ask for her papers, and while we're at it, inspect her luggage." Miller smirked, another dark thought forming. Maybe some gratuity will fall out so she can be overlooked. These rich types usually hate trouble. The intent to extort had formed, and so the two young police officers, driven by completely wrongful motives based on racial prejudice and greed, decided to approach Aaliyah Dubois. They walked closer, deliberately putting on a show of fake friendliness, but their tone was laced with condescension. "Hey there, ma'am," Miller called out first, deliberately drawing out the words mockingly. "You look tired. Where'd you come from looking so fancy?" Aaliyah turned, slightly frowning at the abrupt approach and disrespectful tone, but maintained minimal courtesy. "Excuse me, officers, is there something I can help you with?" "Help? We're the ones seeing if we can help you," Miller smirked, his eyes making no secret of their scrutiny as they swept over Aaliyah's outfit and Hermes bag. "You don't look like a typical tourist. Where are you coming from? What do you do for a living?" "I just returned from Paris after a business trip," Aaliyah answered briefly, unwilling to disclose too much personal information. "Paris, huh? Sounds fancy," Kelly chimed in, his tone equally unfriendly. "Must have bought a lot of designer stuff, right? This suitcase must be heavy." "Where's your ID? Let us see it," Miller demanded, his voice hardening. Aaliyah began to feel genuinely annoyed by the intrusive attitude and unreasonable questions. "Officers, I don't understand why I need to show identification when I'm simply waiting for my luggage like everyone else. Do you have any legitimate reason to suspect me?" She presented her passport, which clearly stated the name Aaliyah Dubois and other personal details. Miller took the passport, flipped through it perfunctorily, seemingly paying no attention to the name or other details. He was focused on his goal. "The reason is, we suspect you might be carrying smuggled goods, undeclared luxury items. You look very suspicious." He handed the passport back to Aaliyah. "That's slander," Aaliyah countered, her voice starting to tense. "I am not carrying anything illegal. If you wish to inspect my luggage, please wait until I've collected it and follow the proper customs inspection procedures with customs officers present." Seeing Aaliyah's firmness and knowledge of procedure, Miller realized fabricating an excuse for an on-the-spot luggage inspection wouldn't be easy. He decided to switch to Plan B, direct extortion. He signaled Kelly to step back slightly, creating distance from onlookers, then leaned closer to Aaliyah, lowering his voice to a whisper, trying to sound sympathetic. "Listen, Mrs. Dubois, I know you don't want trouble at the airport, right? Customs procedures are a hassle. Getting held up for a thorough check takes time, maybe even get your stuff confiscated. Heavy fines, too." He paused, looking directly into Aaliyah's eyes meaningfully. "We can be flexible, help you skip all that annoying red tape. Consider it unseen." He glanced around again, then spoke even lower. "Just need you to be reasonable. Think of it as a quick processing fee, to smooth things over. Not much, just about, $2,000 cash should do it. You give us the money, we leave, you get your luggage and go home. Quick, discreet, nobody knows." At this point, contempt was plain on Aaliyah's face. She couldn't believe the audacity and recklessness of this young officer. "Officer," she said, her voice like ice, "what you are doing is called extortion. It's a serious crime. I repeat, I am not carrying illegal goods, and I would never give you a single cent this way." She pulled her cell phone from her coat pocket. "Now, I'm going to call my lawyer and—" It was the act of pulling out the phone and the firm declaration to call a lawyer that truly panicked Miller, but that fear quickly turned into blind rage. He feared being exposed, his extortion attempt revealed. He felt challenged, disrespected. He had to act immediately to silence and punish this defiant woman. "You dare call a lawyer?" he yelled, his voice cracking. "You dare resist an officer performing his duty?" He lunged forward, grabbing Aaliyah's arm, holding the phone. "Don't touch me!" Aaliyah instinctively pulled her arm back. "Resisting arrest!" Miller roared, seeing it as the perfect excuse. He turned to Kelly, who was also somewhat bewildered by the rapid escalation. "Kelly! What are you standing there for? Cuff her! Now! Suspicion of smuggling luxury goods and resisting an officer!" Under Miller's pressure and furious gaze, coupled with a vague fear of disobeying a superior, though Miller wasn't technically his direct superior, Kelly acted. He lunged, using his strength to subdue Aaliyah, wrenching her arms behind her back despite her verbal protests. And then, the cold click of the handcuffs echoed, marking a serious escalation of the incident, turning harassment and attempted extortion into a blatant case of unlawful arrest and abuse of power right in the middle of the crowded international airport. Escorted none too gently out of the noisy baggage claim area by the two young officers, Miller and Kelly, Aaliyah Dubois felt a wave of outrage and bitter humiliation rise within her. Her last suitcase remained abandoned on the moving carousel while she was dragged away like a criminal under the curious, sympathetic, and indignant eyes of hundreds of other passengers. Murmurs rose behind her, and she was certain more than a few cell phones were pointed in her direction. They led her down a quieter corridor, then pushed her into a small room marked Airport Police Security. The room was rather basic, somewhat messy, and smelled of stale cigarette smoke. There was only a peeling metal desk, a few hard plastic chairs, a steel filing cabinet, and an old gray desk phone. The fluorescent light overhead flickered weakly. "Sit down there," Miller ordered, shoving Aaliyah hard into a plastic chair. The push was forceful enough to nearly make her stumble. "Sit still and wait. Let's see how tough you can be now." He slammed the door shut, the sound loud in the confined space. Kelly leaned against the wall near the door, arms crossed, trying to appear cool and in control, but his eyes betrayed anxiety and uncertainty. Perhaps he was starting to feel uneasy about their actions. Miller paced the room, looking at Aaliyah with a mix of triumph and frustration. "See? Told you not to resist. Now what? Lost that fancy attitude, huh?" He stopped in front of Aaliyah, leaning down, his voice full of mockery. "Now tell the truth. Who are you? What do you do for a living to have so much money? That designer stuff is dirty money, right?" Aaliyah lifted her head, looking straight into Miller's eyes through her sunglasses. She had regained the necessary composure. Years of standing beside her husband through a turbulent political career, facing all sorts of complex situations and malicious attacks, had forged in her a steely resolve. She knew fear or weakness was useless now. She needed to stay clear-headed and find the smartest way out of this situation. "I repeat for the last time, officer," she said, her voice calm and clear without a tremor. "I am Aaliyah Dubois. I am a law-abiding citizen. You have arrested me unlawfully, based on your misguided prejudices and abuse of power." She paused, then continued, her voice firmer. "Now I demand to make a phone call. That is my legal right." "Calling again?" Kelly spoke up from the wall, his voice still slightly mocking but less confident. "Really gonna call a lawyer? Let's see what lawyer dares to come here and mess with the police. Or maybe call some rich daddy to come bail you out," Miller sneered, but his smile seemed forced. Aaliyah's unnerving calmness was starting to make him slightly uneasy. "I'm not calling a lawyer, nor am I calling any rich daddy," Aaliyah replied, her voice firm. "I need to call my husband." "Your husband?" Miller smirked, trying to appear dismissive to hide his creeping anxiety. "What can your husband do? Probably just some nouveau riche black dude, right?" The crude, malicious, racist remark slipped out once more. Aaliyah didn't react angrily to the insult this time. She just looked at him with cold eyes, as if pitying a pathetic creature. She slowly, clearly recited a specific phone number. "Please dial this number for me." Miller looked at the number Aaliyah had recited. It wasn't a typical phone number. It looked like an internal or priority line. A bit of curiosity and a desire to see what game this woman would play out made him click his tongue and point to the old desk phone. "All right, make the call. Kelly, dial it for her." Kelly walked to the desk, picked up the receiver, and hesitantly dialed the numbers Aaliyah had read. Both Miller and Kelly strained to listen. The ringing tone echoed in the silent room. One ring. Instantly, someone picked up on the other end. A deep, familiar male voice, yet one carrying undeniable authority, came clearly through the desk phone's speaker. "Mayor Dubois' office." As soon as they heard the words, "Mayor Dubois," Miller and Kelly froze as if struck by lightning. They stood stock still, eyes wide, staring at each other in utter horror. Dubois? Mayor Dubois? That surname. Exactly the same as the woman they had handcuffed. It couldn't be. Aaliyah, maintaining her calm demeanor, spoke into the receiver, held by Kelly. "Please let me speak to Mayor Dubois. Tell him it's Aaliyah, his wife, calling." The secretary on the other end clearly recognized the familiar voice and the importance of the call. "Oh, Mrs. Dubois, please hold for one moment. I'll connect you to the mayor immediately." During the brief wait, the air in the security room seemed to freeze solid. Miller and Kelly stood rooted to the spot, their faces deathly pale, ice running through their veins. The mayor's wife? Aaliyah Dubois? The First Lady of Gateway City? The powerful woman, influential in social and charitable activities? Impossible. How could they have been so stupid as to insult, attempt to extort, and handcuff the mayor's wife herself? They recalled the designer clothes, the confident demeanor, the calmness under pressure. It all fit. How could they have been so blind? "Aaliyah? Honey, where are you? Why are you calling me on this line?" The worried yet authoritative voice of Mayor Charles Dubois came through the speakerphone, shattering the officer's panicked thoughts. "Charles, it's me," Aaliyah replied, her voice now holding a faint trace of weariness and hurt. "I just landed at GCIA, but there's been a little trouble, dear. I'm in the airport police security room." "What?" The mayor's voice on the other end shot up in shock and anger. "You're in the police security room? Who dared do this to you? What happened?" "It was these two police officers," Aaliyah said, her voice becoming clear and steely again as she glanced at the two men trembling like leaves beside her. "Their names are Chad Miller and Brian Kelly. They stopped me, said I looked suspicious. Then they handcuffed me, claiming I was resisting." She didn't need to detail the extortion attempt or the insults. She knew her husband would understand. "Miller and Kelly?" The mayor practically roared through the phone. "Those names! All right, honey, you stay right there. Don't go anywhere. Don't worry about a thing. Police Chief Petrova and I are on our way immediately. Immediately!" The call ended abruptly. The silence in the room became more terrifying than ever. Miller and Kelly stood there, petrified. They knew their fate had been sealed by that short call. Police Chief Petrova? She was known for being strict and uncompromising. Now both the mayor and the police chief were coming. You really are the mayor's wife?" Miller stammered, his voice trembling uncontrollably, looking at Aaliyah with utter horror and disbelief. Kelly completely crumpled, his legs giving out as he slowly sank to the cold floor. "Oh God, we really didn't know. Please forgive us, ma'am. We were blind." He began to sob, a picture of utter misery. Miller was also in extreme panic. He fumbled for the handcuff key in his pocket, his hands shaking so badly he dropped it with a clatter. He hastily bent down to pick it up, then fumbled awkwardly until he finally managed to insert the key into the lock on the cuffs biting into Aaliyah's wrists. "Ma'am, please spare us," he stammered while unlocking the cuffs. "We were blind. We just acted out of stupid habit. Please, ma'am, put in a good word for us with the mayor." Click! The last cuff sprang open. Aaliyah immediately stepped back, distancing herself from the two men lost in panic and despair. She gently rubbed her wrists, marked with deep red lines, her cold gaze sweeping over them with contempt and revulsion. Their belated cowardly pleas could not erase the insult, the humiliation, and the sense of insecurity she had just endured. Justice needed to be served, not with easy forgiveness, but with appropriate punishment. Less than 15 minutes after the fateful phone call, the door to the airport police security room burst open again. This time it wasn't mysterious agents in black suits, but the most powerful figures in Gateway City. Mayor Charles Dubois, a distinguished white man in his 50s, sharp in a navy blue business suit, entered with his face flushed with anger and worry. Close behind him was Police Chief Elena Petrova, a strong and decisive woman of Eastern European descent around the same age, dressed in her immaculate police uniform, her face showing grave seriousness, embarrassment, and unconcealed anger. Following them were a small group of the mayor's aides and several high-ranking police officers from the GCPD command staff. Mayor Dubois practically rushed to his wife's side. "Aaliyah, honey, are you all right?" He hugged her tightly, his voice full of anguish. He looked down at the red marks on her wrists, the fury in his eyes intensifying. "My God, how could they do this to you?" While the mayor comforted his wife, Police Chief Petrova turned to face the two culprits cowering in the corner, pale-faced and trembling uncontrollably. Her eyes were like ice, her steely voice cutting through the noise drifting in from outside. "Officer Chad Miller! Officer Brian Kelly!" The two young officers jumped, instinctively straightening up but keeping their heads bowed. "Who gave you permission to act like thugs?" Chief Petrova shouted. "Who gave you the right to insult, harass, extort, and unlawfully arrest a citizen, especially the First Lady of this city, right here at an international airport?" Miller and Kelly stammered attempts at explanation, trying to blame misunderstanding, mistaken identity, work pressure, or any excuse they could grasp in their panic. But their words were disjointed, contradictory, and utterly meaningless against the stark reality and the fury of the police chief. Chief Petrova wasted no more time listening to their deceitful excuses. She gave a curt, undeniable order. "You two, immediately surrender your weapons, badges, and ID cards. As of this moment, you are both officially suspended indefinitely. These two officers," she indicated two senior officers accompanying her, "will escort you to police headquarters. You will be interrogated immediately by Internal Affairs. Do not expect any leniency." Miller and Kelly, knowing their fate was sealed, didn't dare utter another word. They silently removed their service pistols, unpinned their GCPD badges, and took out their ID cards in utter humiliation. The two senior officers immediately stepped forward, collected the items, and escorted them out of the room, closing a short but scandalous chapter in their fledgling police careers. Once the troublemakers were gone, Chief Petrova turned back to Mayor Dubois and First Lady Aaliyah, her face showing sincere remorse and embarrassment. "Mr. Mayor, Mrs. Dubois, I truly don't know what to say to express my regret and shame over the conduct of my subordinates. Their actions are utterly unacceptable, violating every ethical rule and departmental discipline. On behalf of the entire Gateway City Police Department, I offer my sincerest apologies to the First Lady." She continued, her voice firm with determination. "I assure you, Mr. Mayor and Mrs. Dubois, that this incident will be investigated swiftly, impartially, and thoroughly. Internal Affairs will begin immediately. I will personally oversee the investigation to ensure there is no cover-up or tolerance for such behavior. The offenders will face the strictest disciplinary action according to the law and departmental regulations. We cannot allow bad apples like them to tarnish the reputation and honor of a force working tirelessly to serve the community." Mayor Dubois nodded, his expression still tense but softening slightly at the chief's decisive stance. Thank you for your prompt response, Chief Petrova. I trust in your impartiality, but I also want to emphasize that this incident isn't merely the wrongdoing of two individuals. It highlights potential underlying issues regarding attitude, prejudice, and discipline within the force that we must address seriously. I demand a comprehensive investigation and truly strong deterrent measures to ensure that no citizen, whether my wife or anyone else, ever has to endure such unjust treatment and abuse of power again. I completely agree, Mr. Mayor, Chief Petrova replied seriously. We will not only deal with these individuals, but also review our procedures, enhance training on ethics, anti-discrimination, and de-escalation skills for the entire force. After reassuring his wife and agreeing on the course of action with the chief, Mayor Dubois personally escorted Aaliyah from the security room. He also instructed his aide to ensure her remaining suitcase was located and delivered safely to their home. The Internal Affairs Division Wine AD investigation within the GCPD began that very night with unprecedented speed and scale. Under immense pressure from the mayor, the chief, and public opinion, news of the incident had started leaking via airport witnesses. IAD investigators worked relentlessly. Mrs. Aaliyah Dubois' detailed and compelling testimony was the core evidence. She recounted the entire event coherently, omitting no detail, from the initial approach, the racial and classist insults, the attempted extortion of $2,000, to being falsely accused of resisting and unlawfully handcuffed. Her testimony perfectly matched the accounts of numerous other witnesses summoned by IAD, including passengers and a few airport security personnel. Surveillance video from the baggage claim area and the corridor leading to the security room was collected and meticulously analyzed. It provided objective visuals of the incident's progression, Miller's arrogant demeanor, and Kelly's complicity. Data from the officers' body cams was also painstakingly recovered and analyzed by technical experts, seeking further evidence of their conversation and actions. Chad Miller's and Brian Kelly's personnel files were reviewed. It was noted that Miller had previous complaints regarding a condescending attitude and inappropriate remarks, though none had resulted in serious discipline. Kelly had a cleaner record, but this incident revealed his lack of backbone and susceptibility to being drawn into misconduct. During tense IAD interrogations, faced with irrefutable evidence and knowing there was no way out, both Miller and Kelly finally admitted to their misconduct. They confessed to profiling Mrs. Aaliyah based on prejudice, using insulting language, attempting extortion, and making the arrest and handcuffing as retaliation and an abuse of power. Their belated confessions further solidified the grounds for the most severe disciplinary action. After a short investigation, IAD completed its report and submitted it to Chief Petrova. The conclusion was undeniable. Chad Miller and Brian Kelly had committed serious violations of numerous codes of conduct, operational procedures, anti-discrimination policies, and laws related to abuse of authority, extortion, and unlawful arrest. Their actions had severely damaged the reputation of the Gateway City Police Department and eroded public trust. Chief Petrova, without hesitation, signed the orders permanently terminating Chad Miller and Brian Kelly from the police force. The decision was announced publicly, demonstrating the GCPD leadership's commitment to cleaning house. However, given the serious criminal nature of their actions, particularly the charges of attempted extortion and unlawful imprisonment, the matter couldn't end with departmental discipline. The case file, along with all evidence and investigative findings, was transferred to the Gateway City District Attorney's Office for consideration of criminal charges. The two young former police officers would now face the full force of the law. The decision to press criminal charges against former officers Chad Miller and Brian Kelly was made swiftly and decisively by the Gateway City District Attorney's Office. District Attorney Jonathan Adams, known for his tough stance against crime and corruption, especially abuse of power within law enforcement, recognized this as a landmark case requiring severe handling to set an example and restore public faith. Pressure from the mayor's office and intense media scrutiny also fueled the process. Formal charges were filed against Miller and Kelly, including several serious felonies. 1. Attempted extortion, based on Mrs. Aaliyah's testimony and the defendant's admissions regarding the demand for $2,000 to skip procedures. A serious felony carrying significant prison time. 2. Unlawful imprisonment, for restraining and handcuffing Mrs. Aaliyah without any legitimate legal basis. Third-degree assault, based on the unnecessary use of force during the handcuffing, causing pain and leaving marks on the victim's wrists. 4th, official misconduct, for abusing their position and authority to commit illegal acts, violating professional ethics, and damaging the department's reputation. The trial of Chad Miller and Brian Kelly took place several months later in the Gateway City District Court and became a focal point for local and national media. The image of two young police officers sworn to uphold justice, standing trial for crimes involving abuse of power, extortion, and racism, sparked intense debate about police accountability and ethics. Security at the courthouse was heightened. Mrs. Aaliyah Dubois, the First Lady, appeared in court as the victim and key witness. She entered the courtroom with poise, dignity, and confidence. She was no longer the weary traveler subjected to unjust treatment, but a symbol of strength, daring to stand up for what was right. On the witness stand, she recounted the entire incident clearly, coherently, and emotionally. She not only detailed Miller and Kelly's misconduct, but also shared her feelings of being insulted and having her dignity violated simply because of her race and appearance. Her testimony was not just legal evidence, but a powerful indictment of the persistent reality of discrimination. Her sincerity and conviction deeply resonated with the jury and everyone present. The prosecution, likely led by D.A. Adams himself or a senior assistant D.A., presented an airtight case. They laid out the irrefutable evidence: Mrs. Aaliyah's testimony, accounts from numerous airport witnesses, surveillance footage, body cam data, the detailed IAD report, and crucially, the defendant's confessions to certain aspects of their misconduct. Prosecutors emphasized the severity of the extortion charge, the blatant abuse of power, the clear racial motivation, and the emotional distress inflicted on the victim. They demanded a stern sentence to ensure deterrence and justice. The defense attorneys for Miller and Kelly faced an almost impossible task. They couldn't refute the fundamental, admitted, and recorded wrongdoings. They could only attempt to mitigate their client's responsibility by focusing on factors like youthful indiscretion, lack of experience, negative influence of the work environment, job pressure, and belated remorse. They tried to persuade the court that the defendants had already paid a price by losing their careers and deserved leniency for a chance to rebuild their lives. However, these arguments proved weak and unconvincing against the weight of the evidence and public outrage. The jury, after hearing all sides and carefully considering the evidence, did not take long to reach a unanimous verdict. When the jury returned to the courtroom, the tension was palpable. Chad Miller and Brian Kelly stood pale-faced, hands clenched. The jury foreperson rose, their voice clear. On the charge of attempted extortion, we, the jury, find the defendant Chad Miller guilty, the defendant Brian Kelly guilty. The foreperson continued, reading guilty verdicts for the other serious charges, including unlawful imprisonment and official misconduct. The final verdict was delivered. Both former officers were convicted on the most serious counts. Miller and Kelly nearly collapsed. Sobs erupted from their families in the gallery. Mrs. Aaliyah Dubois, seated in the front row with her husband, gave a slight nod, her eyes holding both relief that justice was served and a touch of sadness for the lost futures of two young men who had destroyed themselves through their own actions. Weeks later, the sentencing hearing convened. Judge Ricardo Garcia, a respected Latino judge known for being strict but fair, particularly in cases involving abuse of power, presided. He looked down at the two defendants standing before him, awaiting the sentences that would define their fates. Judge Garcia began reading his judgment, his voice solemn and weighty. He strongly condemned Miller and Kelly's actions, calling them a betrayal of their oath to serve the public, acts that tarnished the image of law enforcement and damaged the community's trust in the justice system. He specifically highlighted the gravity of the extortion charge, the abuse of power to commit crimes, and the element of racial bias that motivated the chain of misconduct. "You defendants," Judge Garcia stated, "were granted power to uphold the law, but instead, you placed yourselves above it. You targeted a victim based on prejudice related to her race and appearance, insulted her dignity, attempted to extort money from her, and ultimately arrested her unlawfully. These actions are not only criminal offenses, but an attack on the core values of equality, justice, and human respect." He acknowledged mitigating factors such as their youth, possible lack of prior criminal records, and their dismissal from the force. However, he emphasized the aggravating factors, the seriousness of attempted extortion, the systematic abuse of power, the discriminatory motive, and the emotional harm caused to the victim. "Justice demands a sentence commensurate with the severity of the offenses and sufficient to deter similar conduct in the future," Judge Garcia declared. "After considering all circumstances, aggravating and mitigating factors, and the relevant statutes, the Gateway City District Court hereby sentences." He paused briefly, then read the final sentences aloud. Defendant Chad Miller, 6 years imprisonment. Defendant Brian Kelly, 6 years imprisonment. The 6-year prison sentences were read out clearly. It was a stern sentence, reflecting the law's intolerance for police misconduct and abuse of power. Miller and Kelly completely broke down upon hearing the sentence. All hope for leniency vanished. They were handcuffed once more by court officers, this time as convicted felons, and led out of the courtroom in heavy silence to begin the long journey behind bars, paying the price for their unforgivable mistakes. The termination from the force and the 6-year prison sentences brought a fitting end to this dramatic story. Justice had been served decisively. The incident became a costly lesson for the Gateway City Police Department and a stark warning to all entrusted with public power. Mrs. Aaliyah Dubois, alongside her husband Mayor Charles Dubois, continued her dedication to the city. After the incident, she arguably became even stronger, more vocal in defending the rights of marginalized groups and promoting anti-discrimination initiatives. She refused to let the terrible experience break her, instead using it as fuel to create positive change. Her image, that of a strong, elegant, and resilient Black woman, inspired many. Thank you for listening to this entire story. If you enjoyed this content, please hit the like button and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss the next meaningful story. We'll have another meaningful story for you tomorrow.